Today, I want to talk about credit card interest rates. And the reason why is because recently Trump came out with a slew of social media posts where he has laid out an agenda that is focused on affordability. And I have covered the housing issue where he said that he was going to essentially ban private equity from owning single family houses, a big plus. But one of the other things that he talked about that I think is just awesome, right? A huge win if it actually gets through, is that he was saying that he was going to cap credit card rates at 10%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at a video that outlines exactly what he plans to do, him working with Elizabeth Warren on this, which is something that she has said that she wanted to tackle for a long period of time, or that she has been focused on for a long time, and provide my thoughts on the entire thing. So let's hop into it and we'll get going. Hi there, pardon the interruption. I just wanted to make a real quick ask that if you are watching my content and you appreciate it, if you could please drop me a subscription. As you can see, through the life of my channel, 95% of the people that watch my content are not subscribed. So if you are watching and you find yourself enjoying the content, I would ask that you drop a subscription. Just, again, a really quick PSA, it would mean a lot to me. It really does help my channel grow, and it allows me to make this something that I can do for a living. So just wanted to take a real quick interruption, and I'll return you back to my video. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy.
Turning now to the economy, some major moves by the Trump administration, maybe a little too late, but potentially trying to swing things before the midterms. Let's put this up here on the screen. Hopefully, one of the more significant things, Senator Elizabeth Warren saying yesterday that this quote, "This morning I gave a speech noting how Donald Trump is driving up costs for families, et cetera, et cetera. After my speech, the president called me and I delivered the same message on affordability to him directly. I told him Congress can pass legislation to cap credit card rates if he will actually fight for it. I also urged him to get House Republicans to pass a bipartisan act on housing, which passed the Senate with unanimous support, which would build more housing and lower costs. No more delays. It is time to deliver relief for American families." And so this has been kind of a dizzying thing, which has been happening behind the scenes, is a spate of executive orders and truths from the Trump administration, which are supporting a lot of these affordability measures, which we've long been supportive of here on the show. So, for example, capping credit card interest rates. Actually, today,
And what I will say just generally about this is that it is good that he reached out to Elizabeth Warren about this. No matter what you think about her, she is very influential in the Democratic Party. And so if it is something that she has been working on, it shows that he is actually probably serious about trying to get this done. Because the biggest takeaway that I had from private equity in housing is that, yes, it will be nice if he gets something like this accomplished, but there's going to be a huge fight against the entrenched powers that are making money off of these systems that are set into place. So, like private equity and housing, when you see Blackstone price of their stock go down essentially 10% on the news of, oh, they're going to kick private equity out of housing, there's going to be a lot of people at that company and who are making money off of these systems that are put into place that are going to fight against that. There's going to be a ton of lobbyists. There's going to be a lot of issues that are going to arise as they're moving forward with a populist agenda. Same thing here. The banks are not going to be happy about being capped at a 10% interest rate. And if you think private equity has a large lobbying group, well, the banks are significantly larger. So the problem is that you see with this is that, yes, banks are going to come out in full force against this. I have already seen quite a few instances where people just come out and they're like, oh, this is so awful. This is going to cause people to get cut off from credit cards, and they're going to have, these accounts are going to be closed overnight because people aren't going to want to put up with it. Like, it's so insane because you just look at it and you go, yeah, shut up. You've been profiting off of 30% interest rates on credit cards for how long now? And that's just not fair. Like, the notion that they're going to just completely cancel it, especially when during Biden, they had a law put into place where you can't, so if you file for bankruptcy, you can't cancel out credit card debt anymore. So it's laughable to think that, oh yeah, people aren't still going to be on the hook for what they have on their credit cards. I mean, they can cancel it and then they're still indebted to these banks. So again, it is just, especially with that law being put in, it's a complete joke, and there's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't be completely capped. Because again, they already got a handout from Biden during his time in office, and so it just makes no sense why it should be that high, because you're not actually taking on a ton of risk. So that's just, I think, the backdrop to it. Again, it is, like I said in the video, we will see if things actually get done, but these interests are going to be fighting against it super, super hard. And again, it's a wait and see, but you just do hope. And like I said, with him reaching out to Elizabeth Warren, because they have, bumped heads in the past and recently, like she said in her post, she had just called him out that day and then he reached out to her. So it's not like they're on the best of terms. So it does show that there may actually be some sort of real interest in getting this agenda pushed forward.
Endorsed the Credit Card Competition Act, which, by the way, would personally decimate me because it nukes the entire points industry. That's fine. I still support it, because I understand it's usurious and it's bad. But this, from my friends in the Senate, they tell me the banks have never lobbied harder against any single piece of legislation since Dodd-Frank, is that the Credit Card Competition Act, which effectively not only caps interest rates, but removes a lot of the points infrastructure and swipe fees, which obviously just print billions and billions and billions of dollars for them, is the one piece of legislation that they have targeted, specifically because look, at 29, 30, 40% interest now, in some cases, you don't have to be a genius at math to see how much money you can print off of all of these people who are desperate and who are in debt.
Yeah, and that's a big thing too, because I had a lot of money on a credit card when I was coming out of college because I was just stupid. Lesson learned: if you're younger and you're in college, do not put the cost of college on a credit card. Like, take out loans instead. But that was the big issue with it, is that I had put one semester because it was summer school and it didn't qualify for a loan on it, from the actually like applying for loans. Like, you can't apply for loans for summer school, at least at that moment in time. And so I put it on a credit card, but then trying to pay that off was like swimming against the tide. Like, like the credit card was completely maxed out, and it was so painful to try and do that. It took so long to finally get it paid off, just because, yes, the rates on them are so high. It was so insane. So again, take it from me, please do not do that for your own good. But yeah, it literally is just printing money. That's the disgusting thing about it. And for them to try and frame it as anything else other than it's literally just bilking people out of money for nothing, essentially. Like, yes, okay, it is kind of floating people money if they need it. That's the idea of credit cards. But at the same time, it's like there's no real value add to this. And then the other thing that's interesting is, on the points, it's kind of like, I have a credit card where you accumulate points, and yeah, it's nice. But the true ecosystem, because I worked for a company that did acquiring, which is like back-end processing for the entire network of running credit cards and approvals and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, the rates that are charged, so I have an understanding of this, but the rates that are charged to merchants, so to actual retail stores that you go and you're buying things from, are just crazy. And they kind of have just had to, throw their hands up and just, all right, this is just what I have to accept as the rate of doing business. But yeah, if you're buying, a little trinket or doodad or, just a small purchase, and it's a few dollars, they could be paying that much just in processing fees. And then they have to take that into account. And then, especially if it's a smaller company, they have to pass that on to you. And if that's all they do is just they sell these one or two little things. So it's a very negative, it's basically very negative for the end user as well. And then on top of that, going back once again to what he's saying about how the banks are fighting back so hard against it, he is completely correct, because I think in the instance of private equity in housing, that's very high profile. That's, it's going to be seen if people are voting against that. But this is just kind of, it's been so deeply entrenched for so long and allowed to happen for such an amount of time that people are not going to pay, I think, as close of attention to this issue as they do private equity in housing. Because credit cards, so many people, they, at least I would like to think, go in and pay off their credit cards immediately. So if you're thinking about it from that stance, like I do that, so I don't think about what the rate on the card actually is, because I pay it off, I zero it out constantly. Like multiple times a month, I go in and I just pay everything off on it. But that's because I'm OCD about it, and probably because of the scenarios that I've had throughout my life in the past. But yeah, for people carrying it over, again, it's just kind of, this is status quo. This is the way it's been going on forever. And so if this one does not make it through, I don't think there's going to be as much of a backlash as housing. And then it's also less visible, right? Because in the housing scenario, if starter houses are $500,000, well, that's kind of an issue. Like, that is very easy to see, especially in some markets, right? Or more, right? If it's like New York City or California or whatever, like those are way more, that is so much more easily. You just load up Zillow, but you don't see the actual effects. Like, people feel it, but it's not, it's like a tack on where it's just like, oh my gosh, why is it so hard to pay it off? But it's not a glaring red visible, like, oh yeah, here's how much money you're actually paying over this amount of time trying to pay off your credit card. So I think just the structure of it and how you view it automatically make this issue harder to fight against and harder to actually make headway on it. Because once again, the banks also just have a huge lobbying apparatus. And so again, I'm less hopeful about this one actually getting accomplished, but it would be good just in general, because, and while you're at it, do something about payday loans and all these other different types of loan, credit markets that are just completely taking advantage.
This is exactly the type of stuff originally, which, there were some promises and some vision, let's say in terms of economic governance, let's say of the country. As things have gotten away from them over a year, you had the housing BlackRock order, then you had the defense contractor order, now you have the credit card interest. Look, who knows, all right? Because you actually have to do something in the Senate to get something like this passed for it to really go through. But Colin Warren, hey, good. There was another one about data centers, actually, that just came out. He says, I have never want Americans to pay higher electricity bills because of data centers. Therefore, my administration is working with technology companies to secure their commitment to the American people. We will have much to announce. Microsoft, who my team has been working with, will make major changes beginning this week to ensure Americans don't pick up the tab for their power consumption in the form of paying higher utility bills. This is as major Wall Street Journal piece out just this morning.
And the thing about this is crazy, because he has been so pedal to the metal with AI that I did not think this would ever happen, right? I thought he would just completely turn a blind eye to it. Plus all of the tech leaders that were at his inauguration. Yeah, you just figured that he didn't care whatsoever. So again, another, if this goes through, huge win, because I think data centers and electricity usage has been a huge issue for anyone who has one of these in their, general vicinity, and it has affected their power, right? How much they're paying for electricity. You just talk to people, and even some people I talked to this holiday season where it was like, oh yeah, our power went up like 60% and we don't know why. And I was like, just look at how many data centers are in your general area. Like, it's pretty much a no-brainer. And so that is the thing with it, is I think this is great as well. And that's why I said it's literally like, oh yeah, there's the private equity in housing, there's the defense contractor thing, there's the credit, and then there's, this electricity. And I think there's a few other ones as well. You just came out with so many things in a row. That would be huge wins for people, for the average American. And so, yeah, this one as well, I think, is a huge win, because I've talked about it before, but the communities don't actually see much of, if at all, any benefit from these things being built in the local community. Like, it's maybe a few jobs at most that come in, but then it spikes electricity, or it raises electricity rates for everyone else. And then the other part of that as well is just it raises the electricity rate. Like, it's not like they're getting some sort of subsidy of, oh yeah, this is how much money these AI companies have been making, so we're going to pay the community for thanks. Like, oh yeah, okay, here's our electricity. And like, no. Absolutely not. Again, people are not seeing jobs really, and they're not seeing any sort of paying back of these things existing near them. Like, there's no real benefit from them. And then the other thing as well that I believe he called out here or in another post was, yeah, these are some of the highest valued companies in the country. Like, if you look at NVIDIA, and then the valuation that ChatGPT is expected to be at when they go public is like $1 trillion. So all these companies are just massively valued. They have all this stock price. So it's like, come on, guys, like, you should be able to pay your own way. There's absolutely no world. These are all the companies that are essentially propping up the stock market. And I'm sorry, but yeah, if you're valued so highly, the least you can do is pay your own way for the electricity that you're utilizing. It's completely insane for you to get subsidized electricity costs off the backs of Americans that are not benefiting from this, literally from AI at all. And I think in a lot of instances are actually having detrimental effects from them.
Warning about the spiking costs of utility. All of this is devils in the details, right? Like, so don't give flowers or props or anything before any of it happens. But I think this is a recognition of the growing problem that they had on affordability, especially post-Sora.
And the thing is, too, that I think is a good thing to point out about it is the AI data centers one is actually probably the most likely to be able to do, because he can just go to these companies and be like, look, this is not going to fly. You need to actually pay your own way, or threaten regulating them. So that one could go through and actually be something that is done without needing to actually go into Congress and get something approved and passed. So that one I'm actually probably the most positive and the most hopeful for getting done. But yeah, these other ones might be a little bit more challenging, but would absolutely, I think they need to happen. They would be good, but absolutely you can't count your chickens before they're hatched, because there are going to be a lot of entrenched interests that are going to be, again, you're going to have to do these things with them kicking and screaming, because they're not going to be happy about this.
And they're like, okay, we actually have to try and to do something about this. The bigger question will be, as we all know, MAGA and Congress are slaves to the White House. They're the Duma. Well, treat them like it and force them to pass something, which is actually counter to their interests. So that is why, look, I think it's good. In generally, it's good. And in some cases, the executive, as we saw under Biden and previously, and with this administration, you can use executive power for a lot of shit, as FDR proved to all of us. Recently, they had this thing with mortgages. Can we put that one up there? This is B2, where the Trump administration is going to buy some $200 billion in bonds to try and to lower the mortgage rates, which actually worked, fell below 6% for the first time in years. This is exactly the type of stuff where if you want higher numbers on economics, if you follow through and it actually, shows up in people's...
Yeah, and there you go. That's another one. where again I named 4 things, but there's a 5th one right here, and I say that, and I think there are a few other ones that I've just completely forgotten about. But that, again, an example of where he told them, you are going to do this. They did it, and then there was a positive effect. So again, I think this proves there are a few things where you can look at it and go, okay, this proves that, yes, there are positive outcomes. Maybe he is actually serious about it. Reaching out to Elizabeth Warren, again, I think is a very positive sign. There are signs that he actually is willing to follow through with the things that he has been proposing. So you just hope that that is the fact. You hope that he can actually follow through on all of it. And again, it's wait and see, but there are positive signs that he could actually be serious about the things that he is proposing.
Of personal finances in November could make an impact. I personally think it might be a little bit too late just because of the entire first year of the administration, from Doge, Medicaid, all this other stuff, and you try to do this at the end. But if you've done anything like this in day one, I mean, man, you could be 70% approval rating.
Yeah,
if you wanted to be.
If he had let out of the gate, I mean, he signed a whole slew of executive orders to begin with, but a lot of those were more fulfilling the culture war desires of the right, and then giving the store away to tech billionaires. I mean, that.
Yeah, and I wonder if some component of it was, okay, we'll give them, because every single president, like if you look, there's actually a site that has a tracker for like, here's all the promises that were made, and here's if they were fulfilled, partially fulfilled, not fulfilled. And so that was, or wait and see, right, if they're still in office. And so if you go, like, I think it's like they maybe get like 1 out of 3 things at the best that they promise. Like big top line, speaking point things leading into the actual election, where they're, here are the things that I want to do. And so, yes, a ton of time, nothing gets done, right? Maybe a quarter, a third gets done at best if you're lucky. But they don't follow through on a lot of things. So I think what probably happened, and this is my most calculating opinion, right? The most calculating thought that I would have if I was planning it is, okay, these people gave me so much money, they got me into office, I'm going to let them run wild, and I'm going to make it known to them that the first year, I'm just going to let them run hog wild, let them get whatever they want, let them go nuts, do whatever you need to do. And then, hopefully, when the second year comes around, I completely, change the direction of the ship. I've seen the light, and now I'm going to do at least some amount of good for actual average Americans. I'm going to try and fix housing. I'm going to do something for people who are struggling in terms of credit card rates. I'm going to lower the mortgage rate to hopefully free up some inventory for housing. I'm going to, there are all these things that, hey, okay, now I'm going to see the light and then try and actually fix things. And then I think a lot can happen in a year. And if by October, November, everything is going good, I think all the evils, I guess I'll call it, of the first year can be completely forgotten about. I think that if people are feeling better and things, the environment is looking better, well then, yes, okay, great. People will forget and will be willing to vote for Republicans if it's seen that, hey, they're helping us out and they're actually feeling some sort of impact on their daily lives. It could be that things are so far gone, because I have covered quite a bit, but a lot of warning signs have been creeping up through the economy that things are essentially as bad, if not worse, than the dot-com bubble, than the real estate bubble popping, like all those depressions that have happened recently. Things are worse now than they were then, but essentially the stock market is just being propped up by AI. And so the issue with that is that he has a very deep hole that he has to try and climb out of. Are these actions, is it possible for him to? Yes. But as I have talked about in the past, it will take some very radical policies, quite frankly, like the ones he has been discussing as of late. They will actually need to be enacted, and he will need to make sure that, okay, if we're actually going to help people, and I think the Republicans will go along with it because it is their political futures that are on the line. Now, there may be some that are in super deep red states like Florida where they do not feel a need to capitulate, if you will. However, I think a lot of them will go along with it because I think they see the writing on the wall. Right now, things are not looking good, and I think there is a gigantic blue wave that could occur. So, again, all of that is to say, yes, hopefully these things actually get taken care of. We'll see. But I think, yes, I do not think a year between then and now, if he is able to actually start moving the ball in the right direction, I think they could rebound 100%. But to the original point that I was making, I'm not certain that that was actually the calculus, and that would be a very cold and calculated way to go about it, because he was calling it, not too long ago, he was calling it a con job and a hoax, right? Democratic hoax, affordability was. And so for him to make this reversal now, it seems like someone may have actually just gotten through to him and been like, look, you're going to go down, this is your time to do it, you have to do it now, or you could become an actual lame duck president during the second half of your, stint in office, your second term, and then it will not look good for you in the history books. And he may see that writing on the wall and, okay, we need to just, we need to actually deliver on something to prevent, because I think a big component of it is he cares a lot about how he is viewed. And if people are viewing, you're the worst president ever, I think that would be something that would be motivating for him he wants to go down as the best president ever. And right now, the delta between where I think people are viewing, especially after his second term, versus how he wants to be remembered, there's a huge gap between those two things. So, yeah, I think for that reason, I think maybe someone finally got through to him. Who knows? But that's kind of how I view it. I don't think it was as cold and calculating, but I do definitely think he probably was, okay, we'll deliver on some of the culture stuff, and hopefully that's enough. And then he kind of had his head in the sand, and then someone finally got through to him. That's what I think the actual most likely scenario was, but just wanted to lay them both out there. Because who knows? No one can actually know, right? Unless you are Trump or someone close around him, but hard to say, right? I think he did have to give some runway to the people who paid him off, essentially, or, contributed to his election, got him to win, however you want to frame that, where, okay, I have to give them some sort of handout to fulfill what he sees as an obligation to them.
Was the thrust of a lot of the early executive orders. If you'd started with this instead, when there's a lot of attention being paid to the media about like, okay, what is this administration going to be and where are they going to put their weight? I think you would have a very different perception for the American people about what their priorities are. And even if, look, I'm skeptical that any of these, just if they do executive orders and aren't able to like really pass legislation through Congress, which the last Congress, like last year, was like the least productive year ever for Congress in history or something like that. They don't have a lot of attention to detail in terms of actually making legislative pushes. So, I'm not convinced that any of these are going to have significant impacts, but it matters a lot. It would have mattered in the beginning a lot to send that message of like, this is what we're focusing on. This is what we're prioritizing. You and I both noted also, many of these issues are like directly out of, go back and look at the many segments and focuses on the show, which is also.
This White House is very online.
Super online.
As we all know.
Yes.
And let's say I often, I don't use Twitter all that much anymore, but when I do, I try to for a purpose. And all of these issues, I have been beating the drum.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, do something about it. I know.
And that's a good point, because they are all, literally everyone who he's selected, not everyone, but most of the people he selected are like influencers or like also very online. Like if you want to call them influencers, like they were very popular. They have, and Trump has stated this in the past, that he likes people who are able to have a good presence, present themselves very well. And so, yeah, I think that's a very good point. And that's why I have always said, for any of this stuff, like it or dislike it, make your opinion known and just comment on any of these people's posts where, hey, yes, positive reinforcement, or be very negative, because I think it does get heard. And if they see enough sentiment in one direction, it can break through. And so, and that's why I think this is all happening now, is because finally people have gotten so fed up. They're basically telling him, look, you need to fix some of these things. And that's possibly why it's even being brought up now. Like, regardless or not of whether something actually gets done, there's some reason why he has basically done a 180 on affordability, Trump. And so that is, again, that is a positive thing about this, is with them being online, they're willing to listen to the average people have an ability to have a megaphone and talk about these things and let the administration know, give them feedback of this is what we want and these are the things that we need. And if enough people are saying it, things will happen. So that's why I say, when you see people who are posting, you need to make your opinion known.
You're all following.
Yeah.
You are looking at the discourse. So look, I'm skeptical. Will it actually happen? There's been all this criticism I have of the AI moratorium and giving the dough. But can you imagine a world where this was February of 2025? That's a different reality.
Right.
No Doge in this.
Doge coming in
oh my God.
with the chainsaw, destroying Social Security, like running around like maniacs,
Yes.
all of that. Instead, you do this. And the other piece is that they, so there's two things. I mean, number one, it does smell of desperation. There's just no doubt about it, where they're looking at the numbers, they're looking at the results of the 2025 elections. They're like, holy shit, we've got a problem. Like, we have to do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge component of it, right, is looking at what happened. And it was funny to me because anyone who is on the right was like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's just, elections in blue states and whatever. But the problem is, yes, if you actually looked at the shifts, not the outcomes, but how close it was, or if Trump won it, or whatever it was, and then how much the Democratic candidate won by, just gigantic. And anyone who has an IQ above 90 would be able to figure out that, yeah, okay, there's a big issue with this, and there's a big problem, and we're going to have to address it, and we need to do something. So I don't care how they came about it. I don't care if it was desperation. I don't care if they just, finally someone figured it out. I don't care if, whatever. However they came to the conclusions that they did, I'm just grateful that they did, because I think it is something needed to be done, because people have just, these companies have been able and allowed to do less and less consumer-oriented, basically just try and screw over their consumers for such a long period of time that it has become essentially untenable. The situation has become untenable. It's not, they literally could not do anything else. It's, the bottom half of Americans were doing so badly that, again, you couldn't squeeze them any harder. And so when that happens, then yeah, it's not good. And so again, I'm just glad that something is being done. Again, reserving judgment to see if they're actually able to achieve it. But I think they do need to do something, because things are just so out of whack right now.
Do it now. And so, at the end of last year, there had been promises from Trump and other administration officials like, you wait and see, we're going to do all kinds of stuff on affordability, even as Trump was calling it a Democrat con job. But in any case, it appears that they got that political message of we are in big trouble if we don't do something. But they're also really sort of stepping on and bearing their own message here, because this stuff is not getting talked about. I mean, even this is the sort of stuff that in another week or in another era, you and I would have done a whole show on each of these individual issues, but we got to cover Iran, we got to cover Venezuela, we got to cover Renee Good getting killed in Minneapolis. There's just so many. And then, are we going into Greenland? What are we doing with Colombia? All of these other things that are understandably going to dominate news coverage and really block out even the messaging value of these things, which is primarily what I think, the value of them ultimately will be. I will say, in terms.
And that's kind of a harsh view on it, but she does have a point in that, yeah, there's so many other things that are going on that it's just kind of insane. Like, you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, I mean, she just listed off all these things that are just huge flashpoints. And the other thing about it too is that the reason why I'm covering it is that I have kind of taken a lean towards, economics, and here are the things that are happening that are bad, and these are things that I think are very important, and so I want to cover them. But they're definitely not. I don't think they're the highest, the highest viewed topics that are going on right now. And so the unfortunate part about it as well is that if he does not actually follow through, I think this is actually being washed over from all those other topics. Like, you have to talk about what is the pulse of Iran, because there are huge implications about if we were to actually go and do military action there. You have to talk about what is going on in Venezuela because we just abducted the president there. You have to talk about, like, there's all these other things that are essentially washing out what would be positive talking points for these sort of economic populist measures that they're trying to take and get passed. And so, yeah, I think it's, again, the economic populism is being washed over, and it's not going to get as much traction as I think it should unless something happens. Like, if these things actually get through, then I'm sure there will be way more coverage. But right now, yeah, the news cycle is just so insane that there's no shortage of things to talk about. And yeah, I think that's just, again, kind of the situation that we find ourselves in. But again, to me, I think it's so important that this is the stuff that I want to cover, because hopefully it comes to fruition. But here are the things I want to, let everyone know. Here are the things that they're talking about getting approved and passing and actually trying to help people out, because I think that is, at the end of the day, what's going to make the biggest difference in the average American's life, right? What we're going to actually feel some sort of relief from. Like, yes, of course, another forever war would absolutely continue to ramp up inflation, and it would be awful. But these smaller things, if you want to call it that, I think are way more important, I think, to your everyday lived experience.
In terms of, like, the impact that they will have, probably the most positive impact that they will have is shifting the Overton window, because it'll be very hard for, if there's a future Democratic administration, it would be very hard for Republicans, not that they won't do it, they certainly will, but to cry socialism when they're like, no, we're actually codifying the sort of things that Trump floated. Mm-hmm. So do you oppose MAGA now? Do you oppose Trump? Because this is like, some extension of his playbook. So I do think it shifts the public debate in a way that over time could be productive and beneficial.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the thing about that, and that's a very important point that I made in my private equity video, housing video, is that what happens is essentially, if any of these things gain a lot of traction, you have to be on board with it, or you basically are viewed as screwing over, and rightfully so, the average American. And so when you are voting against these sort of resolutions that are being brought up for vote, especially if it's single, right, where it's just, we're doing a bill on the housing, we're doing a bill on credit card rates, we're doing whatever it is, you cannot be seen to be voting against those things. And so the problem was before is that they would just be shoved in some huge omnibus bill, and you look at it and you just go, oh yeah, it's very easy for me to vote yes or no. And of course they get pushed through, because they always get pushed through eventually, because it's, okay, well, here's one or two things for the people, and then here's all the company, corporate handouts as well tacked onto this thing. So it always only ever went in one direction. That's why, like she was saying earlier, Congress is doing as little as it ever has in its entire history. because it's not even going to be a talking point. That's how they want it, is that they cannot have basically negative things brought up against them and threaten them, their reign in office if it's not talked about at all. And that's essentially what it was. But now, if they're seen voting against these sort of populist movements or these bills or, whatever it is, if they're seen voting against them, well, now there's something big for them to get smeared for in their next re-election campaign. And that is very threatening. So that is the thing that I think is very important about this, is that by Trump bringing it up and forcing some sort of action on it, these elected officials can't just skate by and vote on the omnibus bills. These huge things with all of this, pork basically shoved into it. Well, now they have to actually stand up and yes or no on something that is good for the average American. And you cannot be, especially as people are feeling the pain of the current economy, you can't be seen voting against those. And if you are 100%, you are at risk the next time you're up for an election. So once again, just definitely something to keep in mind. I think it is very good, if for nothing else than, yes, it has shifted the Overton window, and now these are things that people are going to be held to account for.
Look, again, most of this probably won't happen, okay? There are deeply, as I just said, if you were to bet on the banks or on Trump, who would you usually bet on to prevail in the United States Senate? Where are we really going to get 60-odd votes to cap credit card interest rates? Probably not. But as you just said, there is an Overton window where you can shift, where literally the leader of the Republican Party is saying we need to cap users' credit card interest rates. You can use that sometime in the future. And you can use it in the way that a lot of people currently do in these intra-MAGA fights, where they say stuff like, so are you saying you oppose President Trump, right? Mm-hmm. And same thing on private equity buying single-family homes. Now we have the credit card stuff. We have the defense contractor. I mean, it's effectively nationalizing the defense contractor industry to come in and to say you can only pay a certain amount of. Listen, I'm all for it. Right? Good. Yeah. I agree. Yes, state is literally the only force that can regulate all of this chaos and insanity currently happening in our private capital markets. I would just say I wish we would do it to a lot more other sectors, including the technology sector or the financial sector, right? But
the financial sector, for sure. And that's the exact thing, is like, that's why I could never actually get on board with the libertarians, where they're just like, free markets will let everything regulate itself. It'll all work out. No, it absolutely will not, because that's basically stating that there's not going to be these forces out there. They're basically lobbying doesn't exist. Like, okay, how do you solve that problem? The free market is not, we have let the free market go, and that's how we got to where we are today. And the thing with that is, yes, government is not the most efficient ever, but that's because the people in government are not held to account. If they are, and they are not allowed to, basically allow fraud to occur, and they actually have to answer for the things that they're doing that are negative, well then, literally the only way to regulate this stuff is through government. Because again, we have all borne witness to how free markets have worked out. And it just basically has ended up with corruption, anti-consumer, because the moment that you get any amount of money, you can basically put that back into the system and then use it to represent your own interests. And that is the biggest problem, I think, that we are seeing play out now, is that all the people with the most money, they're getting what they want. And how has that worked out for us? Not very well. So that's why, the libertarian argument, I think, is just completely stupid. I agree with some of their viewpoints, because I like to say I'm a libertarian in the view of, look, you do whatever you want, I'll do whatever I want, and as long as it doesn't infringe on each other, no harm, no foul. I don't care what you do, you don't care what I do. But when it comes to economics and that sort of thing, I think they're just completely incorrect, because again, we have seen how that has played out, and not good. That's what I would say.
I mean, the messaging problem that you're highlighting is also the fundamental issue with the administration. Is I do think waiting a year, they let everything get. I mean, first of all, no Democrat even if this is going to give you credit now at this point. You're in Biden territory, period. Like in the way that the Republicans truly hated Biden, that's how the Dems feel. No matter what, you could give them all $5,000 checks. I still think they wouldn't do anything for you, at this point. Seriously. And the news value, as you just said, I mean, every story you just listed is actually more important because you are like, well, that has more reality of actually happening. These are potential Overton window. It's like, you kind of robbed yourself of that ability. Yeah. And then finally, as we learned under Biden, because they did similar desperate measures when they were underwater, it didn't work. By November, even when inflation was like kind of ticking down a little bit, nope. The first year was really what stuck in everybody's mind. This is a cancer always on presidents. You really only have like 3 or 4 months to really do something. And Doge defined everything. I would say truly, like the honeymoon to the extent that it even existed. Liberation Day, people were like, I'm done. I really believe that.
Well, and I think you're right about that. I think the tariffs are the most economically disastrous, just from a political perspective, move that, I mean, it's hard to think of something that immediately turned, because Trump's whole brand was being good on the economy. Yeah. That flipped on a dime after Liberation Day. And I don't...
I'm not certain that I believe that, because the problem is I feel like, at the time, tariffs were a huge thing. But the problem is companies were already charging so much and they had so much room to absorb the tariff costs because they just were taking advantage of the average American. That, I mean, think about it. If you were to talk to someone, like, do you even realize that tariffs are a thing right now? Like, could you tell me how much prices have increased due to tariffs? I think tariffs are kind of overblown. I think the bigger problem for them is the optics of, and I think this is probably my biggest reason. I mean, just think about what happened in Minnesota with ICE. Like, that has been a huge shift. And I think that these sorts of things, or, ICE in California, or, the way that they have been publicizing what they are doing with ICE, I think that has been a bigger issue for them and a bigger noose around their necks than the tariffs. The tariffs, yes, at the time there was, panic and outrage about it, but for the average American, like, I feel like I haven't really seen prices ticking up from them, right? Or it hasn't been pinned to that, or I've seen prices in grocery stores come down, So I feel like, yes, it may have at the time been a bigger issue, but I feel like people just kind of are like, all right, like, whatever. Like, they're not thinking about it actively, versus, again, the ICE stuff that's going on. Those are bigger and stickier headlines than, prices just continue to run up. And once again, most of the price of the tariffs have actually been eaten by the companies. I think it's like 80% of that has been eaten by the companies, and only 20% of it has been passed on, because, again, the prices are already so astronomically high that they can't raise them anymore. And so that is why I think, the tariffs are not nearly as bad. And once again, if they can actually make it so that people just feel better come midterm time, I think it can be reversed. Again, I think will be an issue if we do start bombing Iran, if, there are a lot of things that could be very negative. It seems like Trump has been kind of pulling back from that. So that is a positive. We'll see what happens. But there are a lot of other things that are, I think, bigger issues, especially for, as they're saying, people on the left. They are firmly entrenched against him now. So, of course, he's not going to win them over, I don't think, with these sorts of policies. But you can win the independents back. You can win. There's a lot of people that you can still win over, versus, the left hated him anyway. Like, yes, you could have picked up some of them if it weren't for all these actions that ICE are taking, or at least publicizing it, right? If it hasn't been blown out of proportion like it has been. So, I think I'm still have to wait and see if these things actually happen, which it seems like he is actually serious about them now. They could be great. It could be helpful. It could actually move the needle, and it could save some Republicans come the midterms. But it certainly is having to dig himself out of a deep hole, because the first year has not been great.
I think that I don't think he will recover from that. I don't think that the brand will recover from that ultimately. And so, it's also like what we said with Biden, you got a reality problem.
Yeah.
Like some messaging, executive orders or whatever that people feel like, okay, sure, are not going to help you pay the bills at the end of the month if you don't see real and concrete action and a sustained focus. We can put, just a few indications of that reality problem up on the screen here. Let's put B3 up on the screen. I thought this was pretty significant just to understand the trend and the dynamic. I think a lot of this has to do with AI. So U.S. workers just received 53.8% of GDP in the third quarter. This is from an account called Hedgy Markets, by the way, that I'm reading from. The lowest share since the government started tracking this in 1947. That's down from 54.6 the quarter before and well below the 55.6% average from the 2020s. At the same time, corporate profit margins are hitting some of their strongest levels in decades. So again,
and that's very important because as I have talked about before, this is a huge issue because productivity keeps going up and workers are not being paid in accordance with how much productivity they have gained over time. And so, yes, that's where you're seeing the very top, the executive level, just, hey, we're getting more and more money, and it is a dystopian future because, people are not, again, if you're seeing the largest economy in the history of the world, why are people struggling at all? They shouldn't be. People should be paid in accordance to what they are bringing into the company. But these companies are getting greedier and greedier, and they're being allowed to. There's no check on, hey, why are you guys doing this? This is not a good thing. You're screwing over your workers. And so, of course, desperation is ticking up. And I think that's why I think the solution that I have come to is that what should happen is there should be a hard tie where you're only allowed to make some, like either 50x or whatever it is. That sounds like a lot, but it's way out of whack from that now. But whatever your lowest paid worker is, you should only, the top person should only be able to make total compensation, stock, everything should only be able to make some amount of exponent greater than that person. That way it's tied so that if you want to make more as the leader of a company, you have to do right by your employees and you need to raise their compensation as well. So that you're not seeing this sort of a thing where you're only making 53% of the GDP, right? For the labor is only making 53%, and then all the leadership is raking in so much money. That's why you're seeing economic disparity so great, worse than during the Gilded Age, because this literally tells you the number right here. This is insane. You can't have this sort of a chart, and that just paints the exact picture that and why that sort of a policy is needed. Because once again, leave it to the leadership, and they're just going to screw over the workers. That's exactly what's going on here. That's why you can't. Once again, you cannot trust the free market, because if you do that, this is what you get. You can't leave it to them. People just take advantage of it, and then they get so disconnected that they're not understanding that people are struggling, and so they just go, oh yeah, I just, funnel more money to me.
Continuation of a trend in which, any sort of productivity gains that are coming into play from AI, like American workers are not benefiting from that. It's just corporate profit margins, which are expanding. And so, people can see the way the economy has become so incredibly slanted. Let's put the next piece up on the screen, which again goes to this same exact issue. You have a massive youth underemployment issue. Let me go ahead and get the specific numbers here. So you've got youth unemployment on pace to reach a 10-year high. Over 15% of 16 to 24-year-olds are unemployed. And I saw another stat that I think it's 43% of college grads are underemployed, meaning you graduate and you're not working in, the field that you studied. You're not fully, you're not working full time. You are underemployed based on your education and based on full-time working hours.
And I think that's actually the most important, right, is underemployed. Because, you're not, what is the value of education anymore? What is the value of college if you're not able to get some sort of degree in a field where you will be able to make a meaningful amount of money and pay off that college that you basically are taking a gamble that I'm going to get a better job with this degree. But if you're not able to obtain that because of AI, because of whatever, greedy companies, whatever the issue is, well then, why did you even go to college? And I think that's the best thing, is painting that picture to either, hey, discourage people from doing that. Is it really worth it anymore? Or at least provide them with a more accurate picture of like, okay, here's the best route forward. Provide them with information so that they can make their own decision. But by not putting this information out there, or if you don't have it available, then yeah, it's hard to make these sorts of choices. Like, how do you know whether it's the best idea for you to take on? I mean, it's a life-altering amount of debt in most instances. So 100%, this is why I say yes, it's good that this is out there. It's good to know where things stand. And also then, hey, do something about it, right? If you don't see that it's a problem, you don't have any sort of ability to understand it and desire to go out there and tackle it. So yeah, good to see this. And I mean, not good to see the trend, but good to see that at least the information is out there that yes, things are not going as good, and hopefully they can do something about it.
It is an absolute crisis. So, and again, AI plays into a good piece of this. And then we can put this last piece up on the screen. That's never a good sign when gold is smashing new records. The markets did not crash yesterday after the whole fight with Jerome Powell and the criminal accusations against him in the way that, frankly, I would have anticipated. I think in part because they saw the statements from Tom Tillis and later in the day Lisa Murkowski saying, like, we're not going to be down for what the president wants to do here. But in any case, we've had gold prices, which is the ultimate, flight to safety, even above and beyond at this point U.S. Treasuries, which people are increasingly nervous about. Gold smashing new record at $4,600. So
yeah, and that's very concerning because again, usually gold is going up if the stock market is going down, but because once again the AI bubble, well, now gold, it continues to surge, but the stock market stays at or near all-time highs. And so when you're seeing that happen, that's just a huge indication that it's a bubble. So when the bubble actually bursts, it's going to be concerning. And with all these assets, right, where there's wars going on with silver now with China, and they're cutting off our supply, and there's just a lot of weird stuff going on, and it's hard to know exactly what to do with your money. But this is very concerning for the U.S. stock market in general, in my opinion. That's what I think this is pointing to, and I would be very cautious with what I'm doing with my money right now, and that's about all I can say. It's hard to know because there are so many different signs pointing in different directions, but there's a reason why Warren Buffett just pulled all of his money out and was sitting on long-term bonds. So that's about all I'll say.
We did get inflation numbers this morning that were fairly good. They came in a little bit lower than expected. So, I do want to put that out there. But in terms of how people are feeling about their job prospects, their future, where things are going, it is very, very bad. And so, I think the administration sees that. They're trying to do something. But to your point, I mean, you said too little too late. And I think that probably really
you need a whole of government approach from the beginning that's concerted. And it's serious. I mean, that's the major problem. And they're also schizophrenic. They're like, oh, well, right now the S&P is up on the year, right? It's up by 1.4% or whatever since January. It's like, okay, well, as I've said a million times, the S&P was up like 60% if you look overall. Biden. So what? Who cares? I mean, it means nothing.
Just like with foreign policy, he wants those mission accomplished moments on economics as well. Right. And that's just not the way that this works.
It's not how it works.
Remember, he had previously said in his Dissent, and everybody was running around talking about, everybody's going to get this $2,000 dividend from the tariffs, blah, blah, blah. Trump got asked about it recently and was like, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, I don't remember saying that. It's like, I mean, the attention span of a goldfish. So will he?
Yeah, and the other thing where they're saying, yeah, you had to do this from the beginning. That is the big issue as I view it is, yes, you look at it and you say that was when everyone was firmly behind him and no one wanted to step out against him. Now with Marjorie Taylor Greene, with Thomas Massie, people are looking, and especially I think if Thomas Massie gets reelected, because they're going hard on him, if he gets reelected, well then, it just is going to show you can step out against Trump. And I think the reason why, if he does survive, is because Thomas Massie is incredibly popular and he is having a populist message. And although now it seems like Trump is headed in that direction as well, so, maybe they align in, hey, we can help each other out. This is the thing that we want. But I think it will also put the message out there that you can step out against him and survive. And although, once again, that's a longer term, right? We're talking about they're trying to do things now that are populist, and that message will not be proven out until after the midterms. But with Marjorie Taylor Greene stepping out against Trump, and yes, she did resign, but hey, by the way, now people are seeing that you can do these sorts of things and be popular. It does allow people to, well, I don't have to go along with everything Trump says. Whereas when he got into office, no one wanted to say anything against him, except maybe Thomas Massie, but that was because he saw him doing the wrong things. So, yeah, that is the thing that I think cannot be understated, is that I think people are starting to see cracks in the foundation of that coalition. And because there are things that, rightfully so, people have been able to speak out against, well, now that could send the message that you can do this too if there's something that you don't believe in, or that maybe your entrenched interests are telling you you're not allowed to, we're not going to donate to your campaign if you try and put in the cap on interest rates on credit cards or whatever it is, right? So it is going to, I think the biggest problem is that, yes, if he tried to do all of this, economic populism from the start, he could have accomplished a lot more of it. But the problem is now it's going to be much more challenging because we live in now a world where people have stepped out, and people who are loyalists to him have stepped out against him, rightfully so, I think. But it has painted the picture of you can go out and given a roadmap of you can go out and do this too.
We have the stick-to-itness to work with Elizabeth Warren and do some bipartisan thing to actually cap credit card interest rates. Maybe, I don't know, or maybe they just take it and run with it. And it's something that he doesn't really have to put his hands on, and it makes its way through. But yeah, long-term thinking and sticking to, really paying attention to the details is not really the thing that he's been about in the past.
Not yet, and that's why, it'd be fair to criticize. I hope to see it. I do. At the very least, who knows? Get some rider in a bill, get a couple votes. Who knows which way 2026 will go in the Senate, right? We're going to talk about that just here in a second. It could happen. It definitely could happen.
And that's the thing, is I think it is very interesting. I think, yes, great if they can get these things done. It will be, I think, a little bit more challenging to do that now than it would have been when he first got into office. Because, yeah, they had the House, the Senate, and, the executive branch and legislative, realistically. And so, yes, there was much more momentum on that side. If you could introduce them one at a time to make Democrats have to defend voting against it, then I think absolutely all of these things would have gotten through very easily. I think there would be a much different scenario that we would be looking at now. I think, populism was the way to go. Zoran has illustrated that, and we'll see what happens. I am hopeful that, yes, it looks like Trump is actually serious about these things, but again, it's a much different landscape than it was at the beginning of his tenure, of his second term. Anyway, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will See you in the next one.